I think the Hizmet movement that Mr. Gulen has inspired is phenomenal. It's a way of saying to, not just to Muslims, but to non-Muslims especially, here's who we are, here's what we need to do. My name is Amir Hussain. I'm a professor at Loyola Marymount University, which is the Catholic university in Los Angeles, and I teach courses there about Islam. I specialize in Islam, but I also teach courses on world religion and comparative theology and interfaith dialogue. I think the Hizmet movement is crucial in contemporary Islam. I teach about contemporary Islam. I happen to be a Muslim. I'm also a scholar of Islam. And as I understand the Hizmet movement, I'm not part of the movement, but the movement means service. And for me, as a Muslim, this is crucial. This is really the heart of what it means to be a Muslim, to do service to others. You know, in the Quran, of course, the fundamental principle for Muslims is Tawheed, the oneness of God. Love God first. Second principle, love your neighbor. You know, and how do you love your neighbor? Well, through service. And so I think the Hizmet movement that Mr. Gulen has inspired is phenomenal. It's a way of saying to, not just to Muslims, but to non-Muslims especially, here's who we are, here's what we need to do. I mentioned that I teach at a Catholic university. The third line of our mission statement is the service of faith and the promotion of justice. That's exactly what Mr. Gulen is doing. That's exactly what the Hizmet movement is doing. You know, how do you serve your faith? Well, you do justice to people. You work for good in the world, and that's what the Hizmet movement is doing. I think the Hizmet movement is perhaps the best face that Islam can have, to say, here we are as Muslims. You know, you come out of a country like Turkey where people are religious. You come out of a country like America and people are religious. You know, in America, in Turkey, people are much more religious than they are, let's say, in European countries where people may not believe in God or go to church or pray. You know, in America, we do that. You know, whether we're Christian or Muslim or Jewish. In Turkey, we do that. The dominant religion in Turkey happens to be Islam. And so here you've got this great movement that comes out of Islam in Turkey to say, how is it that we are to live our lives as Muslims? Well, first of all, we're supposed to be good Muslims. We're supposed to be observant. We're supposed to be practicing. We do all the things that make us Muslims. But then, how do we go out in the world as Muslims? You know, what are the things we're required to do? And we're required to do service. We're required to do justice. And that's really one of the key things about the Hizmet movement, is that it provides a vehicle for people to do that. You know, the nice thing about it is you have so many layers of things. You've got the schools, you've got television, you've got newspapers. So it's not that to be religious you have to be an imam and, you know, lead the prayers in the masjid. You can be a journalist, you can be a photographer, you can be a teacher, you can live your life as a good Muslim. And to do that in service to others is really the ideal. So I think that's where the Hizmet movement is key, providing opportunities for people to serve other people. I think there are a number of ways in which the Hizmet movement can be considered unique. The key for me, and I say that as someone who works on interfaith dialogue and interfaith solidarity, is the interfaith work that the Hizmet movement does. That is not just about making Turkey better for Turkish people who happen to be Muslim. It's about making the world better for people who may be Muslim, who may not be Muslim. So I think the key for me, the key contribution of the Hizmet movement, what makes it unique, is the emphasis on interfaith. Tremendous work that's being done there. The second thing, as I said, would be the emphasis on education, that there are so many movements that are revival movements, renewal movements in Islam, and they're all great. What makes Hizmet unique is the focus on education. And I say that again as someone who works in education, who teaches young people at the university level. You know, you start at a much earlier age, not at the university level where they're already sort of shaped. You know, when they get to me, they're already formed as adults. The Hizmet movement is working with them when they're smaller, and there's nothing better that you can do. You know, there's a very famous Muslim teacher who once said to me, if the search for knowledge is incumbent upon all Muslims, then teaching is a religious act. And I never thought about that, you know, the real crucial act that teaching represents for us as Muslims. So that's really key. So I think those two things for me are the unique kinds of things. I mean, there's lots of organizations that do good work. I'm not saying Hizmet doesn't do good work. Of course, Hizmet does good work. There's lots of organizations that do good work. I think what sets it apart is the emphasis on interfaith and the emphasis on education. I think the emphasis on education that Hizmet has is crucial. And again, I'm biased when I say that. I'm not a member of the Hizmet movement, but I'm an educator. I'm someone who spent his career working in schools as a teacher. This is who I am, as a teacher. And so I think teaching is crucial. I think teaching is important. This is what the Hizmet movement does through schools, not just schools in Turkey, but schools around the world, because the Muslim world is in desperate need of this. I mean, everyone is in desperate need. No one is educated enough. No one says, I'm smart enough, I don't need to learn anything else, you know. All of us need to learn something, you know. And that's really one of the key features, because education is transformative. You know, my father worked in the assembly line at the Ford Motor Company. My mother worked on the assembly line making fans. You know, the fact that I'm a professor and my sister's an engineer is education. You know, you don't have to work in the factories because that's what your father did. You're able to go to school, you're able to get an education, you're able to work in very different kinds of ways. And I see that, you know, kids whose parents may be gardeners, nothing wrong with being a gardener, but if you want to run your own company, it's really nice to be able to do that if your parents came from very modest means. That for me is the real virtue of education, that it's an equalizer. It's not that your father was wealthy and therefore you can go to school. It's not that, you know, your father is an important person, therefore you can go to school. Everyone should be able to go to school. Doesn't matter who your father is, doesn't matter if your mother is poor, doesn't matter if your mother is rich, you know. And I think that's one of the keys that the Hizmet movement has done, is the school system, that you come in a society where unfortunately the public schools may not be very good. And what do? Well, you provide an alternative to those public schools. And in those schools, you teach people, but you teach people how to socialize, how to live with each other. You know, are they religious schools? No, not in the sense that the students are simply learning, you know, the Quran and Hadith and that's all that they learn. But of course, if they're religious people, then they need to have that. You know, I come from a Catholic university where it's very clear that the Catholic religious tradition is what inspires education. But the fact that I'm welcome there as someone who not only is not Catholic, but is not Christian, you know, who's a Muslim, I think that's crucial. And that's the real key, you know, with the Hizmet schools, is that you're able to change people through the education. And that's one of the things we haven't really talked about the Hizmet movement, is the charitable work that it does. And that's crucial, you know. As Muslims, we're commanded to do this. You know, if you look at the fourth pillar of fasting in Ramadan, if you look at the third pillar of giving zakat, you know, we have an obligation. The wealthy have an obligation to the poor. And so as Muslims, we're commanded by God to do this. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are Muslims who don't follow that command, you know, who want to succeed for themselves and not to better their societies. You know, that's one of the great things about the Hizmet movement, is the charitable work that it does, to say, no, we need to, as a society, work together. So it's not just individuals, it's individuals working together as a collective, giving their money. As Muslims, we're required to give zakat. If we have wealth, we're required to give that. How do we do that? How do we take that money and actually make a difference in the world? That's one of the great things about the charitable work that Hizmet is doing. It provides the opportunity. I think the other thing that's crucial here is that so many Muslims think that zakat is only for Muslims, that, you know, as Muslims you only have an obligation to help other Muslims. No. Other people are created by God as well. You know, as Muslims, we don't say that as Muslims we're created by God, but the Hindus, the Jews, the Buddhists, they're not created by the same God. That's ridiculous. It's the same God who creates us. It's the same God that asks us to take care of our brothers and sisters without asking if there are Muslim, you know, brothers and sisters. So that, I think, is one of the real key points about the charitable work that Hizmet does, is that it's not limited to Muslims.
This is the attempt to celebrate all of humanity, and I think that's why Hizmet is different from other religious groups.
And it's obvious that elected officials and the executive, who is elected, have the tendency to cater to their base. The judiciary has to be independent. The judiciary's role is to see that the protection of the rest of the population that's not a part of the majority is maintained and enforced. It is in many ways to protect all citizens, including the minority citizens, from the government or from government excesses.